And we're back to continue our conversation on politics in this campaign. Governor Ed Rendell, he was our guest many times when he was governor of Pennsylvania. Has a new book out called A Nation of Wusses. Also here with us, the longtime Democratic consultant, senior strategist for John Kerry, Bob Shrum, and Washington Post columnist and former speechwriter for George W. Bush. And down in Texas this morning, Republican Senator Bailey Hutchison. She's coming out of Dallas today. Well, Governor Rendell, I want to start with you because you do have this book. I have to ask you about the title. Who are the wusses?
Well, pretty much all of the folks that are in power today. Democrats are afraid to confront our base, for example, to tell seniors that we have to do something with entitlements because that's where the money is, and we can do it without really crushing benefits. Republicans are afraid of Grover Nordquist. They're afraid to raise revenue, even though everyone knows we can't do it by cuts alone. We've got to have revenue and cuts. And unless we get leaders who are willing to take a little risk to do what's right, we're going to hell in a handbasket.
Well, that takes me right to Senator Hutchison, and something, Senator, I want to ask you about. You're retiring, of course, and there's a very hot race, a Republican primary now, to decide who's going to get the Republican nomination running for your seat. David Dewhurst is the lieutenant governor. I guess I would call him, if there's such a thing as an establishment candidate, I would call him the establishment candidate. He's in a runoff now with the Tea Party candidate, Ted Cruz. But I want to show you a clip of an ad, part of an ad that was run by that conservative group that the governor talks about, the Club for Growth. Listen to this.
The Dallas Morning News says Dewhurst has served as a moderate Republican.
The Houston Chronicle says Dewhurst is generally considered a moderate.
My heavens, horror of horrors, a moderate. Senator, has moderate become a dirty word?
You know, I think it has. People have called me a moderate. I've always been a conservative. David Dewhurst is certainly a conservative, and he and the governor have done all of the work in the legislature in a conservative way. And the governor is very conservative and supporting David Dewhurst as well. So, you know, I think you can differ on issues, of course, but making moderate seem like you're liberal when you're really conservative, I think is kind of a misstatement.
But I mean, does that kind of bother you that we're now talking about moderation as being something we ought to shy away from, maybe?
Well, I think that conservative is not a dirty word, and I think that moderate is a different type of approach to things. I don't think it's bad. It's just labeling people wrongly, I think, is what's bad.
Well, Mr. Gerson, you wrote speeches for George Bush. You write a column now that obviously you write from the right. Right. What about this thing that somehow moderation is something that people don't want to be known as?
I do think it's a problem. I mean, you have to, for a national presidential election, you have to run towards the center. There's no question that Mitt Romney will have to do that. And to govern in Washington, you're going to have to make agreements on entitlements and other things. It requires both parties. So using that as an epithet is actually undermines our political system and making it work. So I think that that's definitely true. Now, with the Tea Party, they're pushing some candidates that are just bad candidates. Cheryl, Engel last time, and O'Donnell. There's some good ones too. Marco Rubio, who is a real star, and others. And so it's a mixed bag when it comes to the Tea Party and their influence in these Senate elections.
What do you think this means, Bob?
Oh, I think the Republican Party has moved very far to the right. I think there's not a lot of room for folks who would make a compromise in terms of what Ed was talking about at the opening of this segment. The president actually was willing, I think, to make a grand bargain last summer. John Boehner has several different explanations, as you've heard on this show, about why he wouldn't do it. But I think fundamentally he went back to his caucus and said, I'm thinking of doing something like this. And they basically let him know that the House Speaker might suddenly be named Eric Cantor if he kept going down this road. So when the president said, let's change this deal a little, he used that as a pretext to walk away. So I think we have a very polarized country, very different from the Senate that I worked in years ago, when you'd see people like Ted Kennedy and Orrin Hatch, who probably doesn't want me to remind the voters of Utah of this, working together to ensure children's health all over this country. Bailey Hutchison has worked with John Kerry on infrastructure. I mean, this is a tradition that is dying, and it is dying to the detriment of the country.
And Bob, that's a perfect example. I mean, I think labels don't matter, conservative, moderate. Kay Bailey Hutchison is a conservative, but she understands that we've got to rebuild our infrastructure or we're going to fall apart and fall behind economically. So she's willing to invest in repairing that infrastructure. I don't care whether her label is conservative or moderate. It's the right thing. It's smart policy.
How do you think the president is doing right now? There's some criticism that, last time it was hope and change, this time he's just negative right out of the box.
Well, I think the president, frankly, I think they don't run as much on their record as they should. I think considering the hand that he was dealt, where he has taken the country, the auto bailout successful, the financial bailout successful, his programs for children's health care, he's done a lot of good, and I think they're a little shy about talking about it.
All right.